Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this regular meeting of Walpole Select Board. It's August 23rd after 7 o'clock, the posted time of our meeting, and I call the meeting to order. Let's stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first order of business tonight is a public hearing for the transfer of an alcoholic beverage package store license and pledge of inventory license from Mark S. and J.W. Abernal DBA Sam's Package Store to RK Main Street LLC DBA Sam's Package Store. Could I have a motion to open a public hearing, please?
Motion to open the public hearing?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500. We're now in a public hearing. So, Aoife, all the paperwork is in and in good order?
Yes.
Good evening.
Hey, good
If you
evening.
could just introduce yourselves and let us know what you've got planned here, and
Sure.
we'll proceed.
Thank you, Board. My name is Matthew Porter. I'm the attorney for R&K Main Street LLC. Along with me is Krishnakant Patel. Mr. Patel is the 100% owner of R&K Main Street LLC. He'd also be the proposed license manager for the store. So as was described, this is the transfer of the license for Sam's Package Store, 262 Main Street. Mr. Patel would be taking over that store as a 100% owner, the day-to-day operator of that store as well. He has a plethora of experience in the liquor industry. I believe he's been in the industry over 21 years. He runs an impeccable ship. They haven't had a single violation at his other store in over 20 years whatsoever. So he certainly understands the rules, responsibilities that come along with operating a license. There's no major anticipated changes to the store. Over time, they're certainly going to be doing cosmetic upgrades. They are purchasing the real estate as well. So I think you'll see a fair amount of updates over time, but no changes to the hours, no changes to the overall, concept of the store. Rockland Trust is financing the transaction and accordingly is looking for the board to approve a pledge of that license. But with that, I can certainly answer any questions the board may have. Mr. Patel can as well.
Great. Well, thank you for being here tonight and for that introduction. And nice to meet you, Mr. Patel, and welcome. We look forward to having you continue to run Sam's the way it's been run over many, many years. And so thank you for being here tonight. Let me just open it up to the board to see if there are any questions. Allie? Glenn?
Can you just clarify, where was your experience and what other town was your store located? Braintree. Yeah. In 21 years in Braintree at the same?
21 years, yeah.
same store?
I own the property with the store.
That's great. Is this an additional location or is this, have you closed the other?
So this is the additional. location.
Additional. Oh, good for you. Okay. And are you going to keep the name, the Sam's?
Sam's, yeah, same
Yeah.
name.
Okay. Great. Okay, thank you.
Ben?
Thanks.
Mark?
No questions?
And none for me either. So is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak? Being none, could I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500. Public hearing is now closed. Ally, could you please provide us with a motion?
Yes. Motion to approve the transfer of the all-alcoholic beverage package store license with pledge of inventory and license from Mark S. and J.W. Admiral DBA Sam's Package Store to R&K Main Street LLC DBA Sam's Package Store, 262 Main Street.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500. Thanks very much.
so
We
much.
appreciate
Have
you
a great
coming
night.
in
Good
today.
luck.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, next order of business is Jody Cuneo, our finance director, is going to come and talk to us about the general obligation school bonds that we voted to approve for the middle school. Is Jody here?
So Lisa's pinch
Oh,
hitting.
Lisa,
in her
okay.
spot.
I'm sorry, Lisa. Okay, come on up.
Okay, as you guys voted to approve for us to go out to borrow, we went out to borrow on August 17th. It was a $20 million bond. We got 4 bids ranging from very close, 3.939 to 3.849. So the winning bid was 3.849, and that was Raymond James and Associates. So we're asking you, the board, to vote and approve the bonds so that we can receive the money on September 1st. And it was actually a $19,660,000 borrowing with a premium of, and actually I don't, About a little over $300,000 for premium that will come off.
And that premium actually reduces the effective
Yes.
interest rate of the bonds, correct?
Yeah, to about 3.822.
Yeah, great. Okay, that's
Okay.
an awesome rate.
So you guys need to read in the vote.
I know that we did some math to do the average of
Yep.
the $50 million borrowing and the additional $20 million to get to the average rate now for really what is the total borrowing for the new middle school.
Yep.
Do we have that?
Yeah, our financial advisor said it came out to be about 3.01 weighted average bond.
That's a great rate.
Yeah.
That's really good. I feel very, very good about where we landed there, so. Any questions for Lisa?
Nope.
I just wanted to offer a couple of comments because when we go out to market for bond issuance, these are municipal bonds, and they need to be rated by the ratings agencies. In this case, Standard & Poor's did the rating on us. And we get a full write-up of their assessment and how they came to the rating. And in this case, we got the AA+ rating, which is the second highest rating that you can get. But interesting, in the write-ups that they gave us, there were a number of comments that they provided us with that I think are worth mentioning here, just because I think they say a lot about the way, Jim, you and your team, the finance team, have been, running the town. And so I just want to just step through those. One was strong management characterized by good financial policies and practices under our financial management assessment methodologies and a strong institutional framework score. Robust budgetary performance exhibited over several years and increasing reserves and liquidity that should provide flexibility to manage long-term liabilities. And strong debt and contingent liability profile characterized by manageable fixed cost as a percentage of the expenditures, including pension and OPEBs, which we've put a lot of energy into over the last many years. And then the final one I want to just call out over on page 5. Overall net debt remains low and affordable at 1.9% of market value, which is, in our view, meaning in S&P's view, a positive credit factor. So that's all really, really good news, and I think you deserve recognition for that, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ally, I'll take a motion.
I move that the forms of votes presented to this meeting be adopted as written and incorporated into the minutes of this meeting in full.
Seconded.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500.
Thank
Thanks,
you very
Lisa.
much.
Appreciate it.
Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa.
All right, next on our agenda, Weston and Sampson Recreation Programming and Facilities Study. We engaged, come on up to the mic while I do a little intro here. We engaged Weston and Sampson to examine several of our facilities that fall under the Recreation Department, to assess those facilities in terms of long-term capital requirements, to make sure that those buildings are properly maintained, and it's beyond buildings, it's also the pools. And so what we're going to hear tonight is the readout of that assessment. Just like many of the assessments we've done over the last many months, this is really step one in a process that we will use to look at prioritization of the work and setting our overall capital plan over the next several years as we tackle some of these items. I know that Weston and Sampson has come up with recommendations, and some showing urgent, some showing important, and so as you go through it, obviously we want to hear about those things, as those will help guide our thinking as we are going forward in the relatively near term. So, Blythe, if you could just introduce yourselves and then take us through the study, that'd be great.
Well, you stole much of my thunder, but I'll do an introduction. I'm Brandon Kunkel. I'm a practice leader of landscape architecture with Weston and Sampson. I'm here with my colleague, Mike Easler. He was the overall project manager for this project, and he's going to run through basically the summary of the report. But essentially, we were engaged by you folks to look at a few of your existing properties, to assess them in their current conditions, and then ultimately what would be required to bring them up to a modern day standard, and then ultimately what are the feasible options moving into the future that would best serve the town. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mike, and we'll be able to answer questions at the end for you folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. Now, both of you have stolen my thunder, so I'm just going to jump right in. First, I wanted to acknowledge the members of the town administration that have helped throughout this process. So Jim Johnson, the town administrator, Patrick Shield, the assistant town administrator, Richard E. Mattson, director of public works, Brendan Croak, the recreation director, Don Anderson, the superintendent of building maintenance, and Justin Monta, the superintendent of parks, forests, and cemeteries. I'm going to go quickly through this one because Brandon's already talked about it, but we looked at the site assessments of each of the 5 sites that were in the facilities study, and we looked at it with the eye of multiple different professionals, including structural, architectural, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, aquatics, and environmental and landscape architecture professionals looking at each of the sites. We identified the site-specific needs and developed initial conceptual plan improvements and cost estimates, and then prioritized those improvements through discussion with the town. The 5 sites on our list included Blackburn Hall, the former East Walpole Library, the Center Pool and Splash Pad, South Pool, and Jarvis Farm. And based on all of the review and discussion, the 4 major takeaways for priority recommendations included replacing the aging pools and the support infrastructure, improving Blackburn Hall's accessibility and storage, complying with ADA codes at all of the properties, and developing a master plan for future use at Jarvis Farm. Blackburn Hall serves as an excellent multifunctional space for the town, and the idea that really came out of the review of the study was, how can we make this space better and more flexible than it already is? We also ranked things as urgent or important if there were things that should be addressed first. Urgent were elements that had a direct influence or impact on safety or the stability of the facilities. So at Blackburn Hall, an urgent need is to replace the existing roof to stop the continued water damage. It's also important to update the interior spaces, especially the bathrooms and stairs, to meet current accessibility code requirements, as well as relocating accessible parking spaces and providing a dedicated path of travel at the entrances to Blackburn Hall. This is an example, and I'm not sure why we're getting the black boxes, I apologize. Those aren't there in the other things, but this is one example of some of the ways that the exterior space could be used, and also an example of the overall cost estimate breakdown. We also provided in the appendices of the report a more itemized breakdown by the urgent, important, and other goals, so that those can be addressed individually or in groups. It's not that everything has to be paid for at once in these plans. The former East Walpole Library also provides a flexible and accessible space, but to smaller groups. And the most important elements include replacing the roof to stabilize the structure and keep additional water damage out, and providing accessible parking spaces and a travel route to the building. It also included the eventual repair and renovation of interior spaces for users, and improving the security and safety throughout with the installation of doors, locks, and a security system. We provided a few different examples of potential parking and access. This is just one example of it. Obviously, when you're between Union and Walcott Street, both are busy, so parking is always going to be at a premium, and space-wise, we're always looking at 5 to 7 spaces at most on site. The central pool and splash pad was one of the most important needs that came out of the discussion and conversations with the study. It's important to replace the current pool shell, deck, and fencing to provide adequate and proper space for users. Right now, the pools do not meet safety codes and are obviously extremely old. It also needs an accessible route that's demarcated from the parking lot. And then for the building itself, which you'll see as a theme here, is replace the roof to stop the existing water damage from continuing, and then renovating the locker rooms and restrooms to meet current accessibility standards. In terms of the splash pad equipment, one urgent element that came to the front was replacing the mechanical equipment shed on site. And when this is done, it could be possible to relocate the shed to a better location. In the original construction, it was the reuse of an existing structure on site, but current access is unsafe for workers and people maintaining the site. We also discussed briefly the opportunity to expand use to the, in this case, northeast. One example that we included, and there was no discussion other than an ideation, thinking from different people in the town. One option would be pickleball courts, another a skate park, potentially a senior walking loop. So it's an unused space that could be developed further if the opportunity arises. South Pool is very similar to the central pool. It's important to replace the current pool shell, deck, and fencing to bring it up to code and provide better accessibility in marking of spaces. And then replacing the roofs, again, to limit the effects of water. And also installing improved ventilation equipment into the restrooms and changing rooms just to work on the moisture issue that is happening and the humidity on that property. We also discussed the option to expand the pool deck and the fencing to create more space for users around the edge. And as you can see, that's one option that we've indicated here. Jarvis Farm, I think the biggest thing that came out of that was developing a site master plan. And this would be a public engagement project to get community input on what they'd like to see there. There's a lot of opportunities for the space. And beyond that master plan, leading to future uses on the site, the other elements are just installing accessible walkways and paths and potentially a parking space or a parking lot to better control vehicles on site. And then removing the deteriorating and unused cabins on site. There was no real discussion that came to any viable use for so many small cabins in such disrepair. So focusing on the cabins that are in good shape, the restroom cabins and the main cabin, removing the unnecessary ones, and developing the site as needs develop. One conceptual option here is a cricket pitch. There's very few in this immediate area, but it's not the only thing that can fit on site. We can rework the existing softball fields to create better alignment or space on the site. We can also fit pickleball courts as, again, an option that could be brought in as an unmet need for the town. That's it.
Great, well, thank you. I'm going to open it up for the board for questions in a moment, but just a couple of thoughts on from me, and then maybe a couple questions. As I mentioned, this is the first step in what will be a long process to figure out how to prioritize this work. As I went through this, and we just went through a very quick and short summary, but there's a 140-page actual analysis here that you guys did, which I think was very detailed and very, very helpful, so I appreciate that. A couple of questions that I have is when you talk about Blackburn and replacing the roof, you've got a lot of conversation in the bigger presentation around the condition of the chimneys and the step flashing around the chimneys, and I'd like you to just spend a moment talking about that and, you know, how much expense repairing those chimneys might be in a context of the total roof work that needs to be done.
So, I mean, we've had conversations with the town, and you know, from a iconic point of view, we think they're worth saving. However, like, they're not structurally integral to the building themselves. If there isn't a real desire to keep them because they're not functioning as chimneys anymore, they aren't necessary as part of the overall character of the building, in my opinion. But you know, those are the weakest points when it comes to the water damage, ultimately. So, you know, it'd be probably take them down and build it back up, or, you know, significant repairs would be required. So, on that, and I think folks here have already priced out looking at replacing the roof, whether or not it was shingles or standing seam roof. But I know there's already been those conversations per se. So from a pricing standpoint, I mean, you know, it would be a significant cost to try and keep them, we'll put it that way. But it, you know, they are historic to the building and, you know, part of the character of that building, so.
Good, okay, thank you, that's helpful. My next question is over to the pools, and I have the same question on both pools. Again, in the bigger report, you talked about leakage in both of the pools, and it was substantial. Can you talk about that a little bit in terms of how much volume, you know, what does each pool hold? Start with that, and then the volume of leakage that you have assessed as part of this review.
Yep. I can't give you the numbers on the total volumes of the pool, but I do know that they were losing 2 to 3 feet of water per day from the top through leakage and evaporation. Most of that is from leakage through the existing shell. The shells are, I believe, close to 100 years old, and there are cracks that are up to 2 inches wide that have been caulked every 2 years for the last however many, at least 4 or 5 cycles that we know about. So you're looking at a very old piece of infrastructure. Skimmers were added in the past, but they don't seem to be properly circulating and filtering the water as they should. And then the overall size of the pools makes them non-compliant for any sort of swim team or competition uses. And finally, there's no lighting under water, so it's out of compliance for night swimming or any opportunities to swim in the dark.
Okay. My read of the report said 20,000 gallons a week out of the central pool, 90,000 out of the south pool, and 128,000 gallons total. So 90,000 out of 128 means we're refilling that pool every 2 weeks? Is that possible?
If not
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
So this is why the pools, I think, need some attention here, where we've got a real issue here with the way these pools are leaking. And these are not the only issues. You've called out a number of things, including the safety issues around that equipment and electrical shed at the central pool, which I think we need to deal with. So in my mind, the pools are gonna rise to, you know, a priority here, maybe more so than things like the East Walpole Library, which, while it needs some work, is nowhere near the priority that I see
We
the
agree
other two.
with that
Yeah.
perspective as well, and based on conversations that we've had with the working group, that seems to be the general consensus from a usability standpoint and just general health and safety.
Okay. Let me open it up to the rest of the board. Who'd like to go first? Sure.
The way I can sort of attack the whole report, it's very comprehensive. I appreciate you putting it together. I do think we should use it as a guide and not let it sit on the shelf, and I'm sure we will do that. So I'll do a couple highlights, things that I think of interesting, whether they're, and they don't necessarily rise to the level of importance. This is like of replacing a pool. That's a multi-million-dollar endeavor, and I'm sure we'll find a way to do it. But I'll look to you, Jim Johnson, because you always talk about low-hanging fruit, and so there's going to be some items in here that might not be, you know, top priority, but they're low-hanging fruit because they're easy, they're relatively cheap. And so you look at the splash pad, we could put up some shade canopies and people would love it in the middle of July when it's 100 degrees, and it's relatively cheap, easy to do, and it checks something off the list. And so I would just, you know, look for that low-hanging fruit category. I like them too, and we should do them when we can. The thing that is sort of interesting to me also, and got me thinking a little bit, was your comment about defining the Stone Street lawn space better than we already do, with a high-functioning exterior space, you know, to really highlight outdoor movies and camps and craft fairs. And I was driving by, and it's just a thought that popped into my head, and we can look into it more. But that access road that gets you from the fire station to Town Hall, in between Blackburn Hall and the field, I wonder if that's even necessary. I wonder if we could extend the green space and maybe have a canopy, a sort of an outdoor covered, you know, protected from the rain, but just like a better high functioning. When you said high functioning, then I started to think about how maybe we could extend from Blackburn Hall. Did that thought cross your mind at all, or does it sound like something that would be doable or helpful or beneficial?
I think that was outside of the scope of our vision when we were looking at this.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's definitely an opportunity that could be followed
I'll
up
look
further.
into, and I don't know what it would cost, but you know, I think, and we would talk to the rec department to make sure that they would benefit from, you know, we wouldn't just do it for the heck of it. I mean, there would have to be a plan, of course. So I just wanted to kind of throw that idea out there, get it out of my head and into other people's heads.
And then the thing that, and this will be my last point, and then I'll go to somebody else, but you talked about newly emerging outdoor public needs, and that strikes me as something, again, relatively low-hanging fruit, because you could have sort of outdoor space that is better used, an escape park, that might cost some money, a cricket pitch, I don't know what that would cost, but we have the space and we could just better use it. You talk about pickleball courts, and then even some smaller type items, I'm thinking outdoor chess or checkers or backgammon, cornhole or horseshoes. I mean, those things don't cost a lot of money, and we have great little spaces, whether it's next to the town, the center pool that you talked about, whether it's Stone Field. Again, just throwing ideas out there, but these are relatively small cost, big benefit items for the community. So I just wanted to, that's more me just talking at you, but I just wanted to
No,
make those points.
you're absolutely right. I mean, so cricket, cricket is definitely a growing sport, at least in New England. And I would even say nationally, pickleball is one of the fastest growing sports. Like, we can't build them fast enough.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Brendan can speak to that. He probably gets calls about them every day.
Yeah.
And we, it's definitely, these are the new emerging recreation activities that towns like yours are starting to put in. And that also includes bocce,
Yeah.
or the shuffleboards, or, as we are learning that spending more time outside due to the pandemic, these types of activities are becoming more and more relevant now.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think they also begin to cover a larger scope of the age continuum in the
That's the goal.
population.
Yep,
So,
that's definitely the goal. Yeah, so thanks. All set.
Okay. Ally?
So thank you for this report. I really enjoyed reading it because it really gave some insight into these buildings. When we talked about Town Hall, the old Town Hall recently, and I was really looking at those urgent and important numbers, and that adds up very quickly for these 4 buildings. I appreciate the ADA access and the focus on that as someone who has a wheelchair using family member and have utilized Blackburn Hall. There's definitely some deficits there in how you manage to park and get into that building. So I think that is important, but anything that is that can cause structural damage, I think that is something we should be focusing on to make sure that these buildings don't continue to go downhill. The pools, those numbers were significant, and I was kind of taken aback by them. The loss of water, though, is incredible. So to be filling the pool so frequently was really an eye-opener. And I think at least one of those projects, I don't know if it's going to be possible to attack both at the same time, but I think it definitely needs to be put on the forefront that we need to address those pools, because I do think it's important. I think the town enjoys having access to public pools, and the fact that we have 2 pools, people use them. They love our splash pad. They come from out of town. I don't think membership or buying of the memberships has gone downhill at all. And it was interesting when Jarvis Farm, my note was a better understanding of the future goals of that property. Was exactly what I wrote, and I was appreciative that there was a cricket court there, because that has been come up for 1A fields as people requesting that we have a cricket field in town. So that's interesting that there's enough space there, because I did not realize how large a cricket field needs to be until more recently. So I think that's wonderful that that could possibly fit there. And then for East Walpole Library, I've actually never been in that building. Structural things that, again, that maybe need to be repaired to ease any structural damage, I think are important, but I'd like to have a better understanding of the usage versus the annual costs of that building. So there was a lot of information, and I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Can I interject just a quick second, just to comment? I know my friends from the Sewer and Water Commission are here, so I have to mention that Jarvis Farm is under their purview, and they would remind us of that if I didn't do it, so I wanted to make that point. And I think a cricket field has been suggested. I was on the Water and Sewer Commission before I was here, and it was suggested to us at one point. And just maybe a comment for you is, so we're restricted, the town is restricted to how we treat those. We can't use any fertilizer. It's there to protect our wells, which are close by. So would we be able to put a cricket pitch, there, with those restrictions and limitations? Have you thought of that?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. We looked at the restrictions, and the firm restrictions are actually to the space south of the open field.
Okay.
So there's a gas right-of-way that runs through there.
Yeah.
It's basically south of the gas right-of-way towards the brook. But in terms of that, I think that in general, in that location and in the sensitive nature of the space around that with the water protection zone and, the trails and stuff, I think that this would probably be a location where not using pesticides would make a lot of sense.
Okay.
Typically, a cricket pitch will have areas that will need to have some maintenance done, especially around the central pitch space.
Mm-hmm.
The pitch space itself is usually concrete or covered, so it itself is just kind of a small solid space. But that would really just come down into kind of regular turf maintenance like you would any field without the pesticides.
Okay.
And again, that's an opinion on that one.
But
with
it's doable.
pesticides, But
to-
yeah, it's
to your
absolutely
point.
doable.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks. Ben?
Yeah. Thanks for coming in and talking to us about this. The one area that I wanted to focus on was the center pool, for all of the reasons that have been mentioned, certainly, but it gets a huge amount of use, all summer, as well as the splash pad. And I know that Ally had mentioned the splash pad being used for parties, people coming from all over. My kids are on the swim team, so I'm down there almost every evening in the summer, and that splash pad is in use probably 4, if not 5 nights out of the week. So it's a great amenity for the town. 2 things that I would comment on this. One is for the central pool specifically is parking. So there's a playground there, which is a big draw for folks, and again is always busy. There's the splash pad, there's the pool, there's a Little League ball field. So we do have a lot of parking over here, near the fire station, near town hall. But that would be something, if we did take this further, we'd need to consider, because that lot fills up very quickly. And we would want to ensure that people that need access to the playground or need access to the splash pad have it. And if people need to walk across from here, it's really not that far. So I think that's a consideration we need to make. And then secondly, and I know that understanding this is just kind of a schematic, conceptual sort of a phase. Having more accessibility into the pool, and having the pool, I know I was at a swim meet a couple weeks ago in Canton, I think it was, and they have a little L that comes off of the pool with a large ramp, right? And so, the Council on Aging they use it all the time for activities. It opens up the use of the pool to a whole nother, section of the population of Walpole. And I think it would be really popular. So I know that we have some space restrictions, but as with many of our conversations in Walpole recently, one of the things we do have a lot of is space. And so, we're really fortunate in that regard. Glenn mentioned off behind the splash pad, there's space. Here where we kind of show a skate park or maybe pickleball courts, there's space there as well. So we do have a lot of options, but I think that's one thing that we would really need to incorporate into a center pool would be that sort of access, to ensure that the greater ability to use the space. But otherwise, this looks great, and it definitely gives us a lot to chew on. So thanks.
Yeah, there's different ways to attack that accessibility piece. They have chair lifts that will bring you up and put you down. They're not the most elegant, but there are different ways to increase that pool accessibility.
Yeah, and I've seen tight up against ramps where it's almost just a wall in between, so it doesn't really take up much more space.
Yep.
Then you also get the larger, almost hemispherical opening.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's an excellent point to incorporate into the future designs there.
Cool. Thanks, Jim.
Mark?
Yeah, thanks for the report. It gives us a lot to think about. We've been talking about the use of capital funds and ARPA funds recently. We have a lot of buildings that need work, including the Old Town Hall. Johnson's going to become available. This sort of adds to that list of projects that we can consider. I wish we had, $30-40 million worth of ARPA money. And we could really take a bite out of this. But I think it brings to light a lot of facts. The pools that have been mentioned, we know my kids were on the swim team 20 years ago, so we know that they needed to be replaced back then, and they still need to be replaced. Jarvis Farm is a great place, and I love the idea of working with sewer and water, and take a look at that again. Maybe a master plan to use that space to the fullest available that makes sense. Blackburn Hall is also a town gem. I mean, it's used for so many programs. It supports the programs on Stone Field, and we all know that needs a bunch of work. I'm gonna since those have all been talked about, I'm going to talk a little bit about the former East Walpole Library. One of the things that we've been talking about is, as a board a little bit, is, buildings, Once we own a building, do we need to own it forever? And I know that building has been underutilized. It lacks parking. There's no on-street parking nearby. So while I recognize that it needs a bunch of work to bring it back up to standard, I would toss into the arena, we should consider maybe selling that building or coming up with another use for it that at least covers its own costs or maybe brings money into the town. If we looked at it from a recreation point of view, and again, I'm sure there are people who have an opinion that we should keep it for all those reasons, and I haven't talked to any of them, so I don't know. But I'd be very open to the idea of selling that building, the next time we go out to market with a few different properties, and maybe redirect that money back into the recreation space, one of these other projects. So I'm just sort of throwing that out as an idea for us to consider. But great job on the report. Gives us a lot to look at, and frankly, a lot to think about, and kind of a lot to worry about from the money point of view. So, but thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I'm going to wrap us up now, but before I do that, I have one thought, and that is that, again, I keep coming back to the amount of water we're losing out of the pools, and I can't help but wonder, well, first of all, it's going to take years to solve that problem by building a new pool, because it's going to take a long time for us to plan that and raise the money for it and all that. I'm wondering if there's some kind of short-term thing we should be doing to buy years for those pools while we, figure out the longer-term project and get that funded. But one of the things that I can't help but wonder, maybe the dumbest idea ever, but I can't help but wonder if putting liners in those pools, might help. And have you guys considered that? Is it even a possibility?
Yeah, we definitely considered it. From a long-term perspective, it's not something we would recommend.
No.
But if you're looking to put a Band-Aid on it for a few years, then that is an option. From a health standpoint, the bigger challenge is, and why we didn't make a recommendation of lining it ultimately, is your water recirculation rate is not able to push enough water through. So minimally, we recommend that you're replacing the filtration system. And once you start doing that, you're basically deconstructing the top 3 to 4 feet of the shell to get to the skimmers and the piping behind it in order to increase the size and the pushing of the water. So once you start messing with that, it doesn't make a lot of sense to try and line it.
Got it. Okay. Well, I started out by saying it might be the dumbest idea ever. So,
Not a dumb idea, but we did consider it.
It's just not a
but
permanent
when you talk
solution.
about filtration flow rates, those leak rates are
Yes.
kicking ass on the
Yes.
filtration flow rates.
Right.
So I just, we've got to come up with something, because those pools are incredibly valuable to the town.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to come up with something. So by way of wrapping, here's what I'd like to suggest. I think, Jim, we need to take the information. We should be figuring out how to put a priority lens on it, urgent items, and I think the pools have got to rise to the top. I think we as a board then need to start thinking about, how will we attack the pools? One at a time, both together, only do one, whatever it might be. We're going to need to figure out designs and then how to fund the work to actually repair these pools to a state where they're, safer and not leaking the way they're leaking today. So I think that's the challenge to us, is figure that out. I think the good news is, and I know we have some FinCom members here tonight, the good news is we set up a capital reserve account in one of the last couple of town meetings. I forget which one it was. And it strikes me that we ought to be thinking about, during our budgeting process, how do we start to fund those capital reserve accounts with earmarked items for the pools and whatever else. There'll be others as well, so that you could accumulate some money over some period of time and therefore keep the borrowing costs down. And this goes toward long-range planning and all that. But I think it also means that you have to have a short-term resolution to that leakage, because I can't help but wonder where 90,000 gallons of water every week is going.
It's going
And-
into the wetlands on the
Yeah,
other side of it.
and so, you know, I'd be concerned about that. So I think we have a lot more to cover on this. We can't do it tonight. I think we need to, you know, take it back now and think about the priorities and, you know, what things do we as a board need to be coming back on and really working hard on as we look ahead to probably the Springtown meeting at this point. And so before I wrap us, any other final thoughts? Really good work. Really appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, next up, we have a discussion with sewer and water. John, I see you're here. If you want to come up to the podium, Pat's here as well. I think Jeff was here too. Whoever you want to bring up. Okay, everybody's here. Okay, good.
I'm just wishing Bill. Yeah, just Bill.
Okay.
Without dropping it.
Okay, so we've got a couple things that we want to accomplish tonight. One is, I do want to take some votes on ARPA, because I know we have those outstanding questions with the water and sewer commissioners about what we're going to fund out of ARPA, and we owe that to you, so I'd like to clarify that tonight. I also want to just talk about broadly some of the other capital work that we've got going on. Before I do that, though, I do want to just make a comment that I was, you know, really impressed with the work, John, you and the team did as a board on the rate setting. And, you know, you have a tough problem there, and you guys really went at it, and I think took a major step forward towards solving that. So I think that's a really big deal, and I appreciate what you guys did there. So that was great leadership. I also know that you had a meeting last night, and think before we get too deep into the discussion, perhaps it would be a good idea for you to just tell us anything that you want to tell us from the meeting last night. You know, anything that was discussed that's relevant to tonight's discussion, votes you took, that kind of thing, just to level set so everyone has all that same information, and then we'll go from there. Does that sound good? All right, thanks, John.
Okay, I guess we'll start with the capital improvement budget for this year is quite robust. And I think our agents have moved a number of projects up to the front, possibly partly because of ARPA, just to show the landscape of town meeting and where we're going, and the priorities of where we should be. I would say that our meeting last night, we had previously made a request on ARPA. That was probably number one, to clarify that so we know how we fund other projects. And we did request the Willis membrane and the raw water transmission lines. Those are our 1 and 2 projects. And we did talk with our agents, made a different recommendation. They did not recommend the water, raw water lines. They recommended a meter improvement, $350,000. So we discussed that. I think the sentiment of the commissioners is still that we preferred the raw water line. And I think Scott had similar sentiments. So that's something that has to be resolved. We also did think that proportionality, given our contributions to the town, as far as our percentage of contributing revenues to municipal budget, we sort of figured we're entitled to about 1.8, 1.9 of funds. So we were thinking of either, from the commissioner's point of view, 1 and 2 is about $1.5 million $1,408,000 of, including one other item, which might be the lagoon, Willis Lagoon design permit, which is about $180,000. So that was our feeling in the administration. I was going to let Jim and Scott actually give the rationale to you about their recommendations to us. They're the professionals. They have their hands on a daily basis. So I think the commissioners didn't really, we just expressed our votes based on the information we were given. So other than that, I think, not talking about anybody else's capital, I see all the capital requests and acknowledge them, so we're happy with that. The other things that might be of significance is the recommendations as far as other funding, which a key one, which I might have Patrick Fasanello talk about, is the supplemental water resource investigation. That was a significant part of our discussion. And I think their environmental things, folks, other than just looking at the past in a rearview mirror about water lines and sewer lines and storage tanks and treatment plants, there's a whole thing with the water basin here with the state coming up with this PFAS threat, the forever contaminants, and forcing communities to get involved in removing these and filtering them. And it's a multi-million-dollar undertaking that's going to be phased in over years. It's almost like a COVID on steroids. And the media isn't talking about it, but it's out there. And because Patrick Fasanello goes to the MWA regularly, I don't know if you want to comment at all, Patrick, on that, or you want me to just give my reading on your sentiments. Essentially, we have an article that I think we'll send to you about communities' water problems in Boston and about the status of the MWRA. Essentially, all towns are realizing that the MWRA has the best water, they have the capacity, they have perfect reservoirs, they have plenty of volume right now when we're in a drought. They're not in a drought. And they have, because there's never been a lot of development about their reservoirs, they don't have these forever contaminants like we do here in the metropolitan area. Because of the old mills, Multi-Bestos, Bird and Son, Bird Machine, all the companies we've had here, those chemicals are here. We didn't put them there, they've been there for 100 more, 200 years. So it's much more expensive for us to deal with that than possibly joining with other communities and getting some of our water at least. It's pretty an emergency if we have to shut wells down. We have to have our basic, water production. So we're very much exploring that. This is a key time. Sorry, my voice is very dry. It's a key time in the state because many other towns are moving forward to join at this time. And there's going to be only so many slots. If we wait too long to come forward, we may miss out altogether. So we want to get that case analyzed and presented to you because we think it's critical. So that's a big concern of the commissioners. That's sort of just a thumbnail of what we talked about, and I think that we're not dangerously pushing too many projects forward. I think some of these, they have the lag times of engineering, study, before implementation. So it's good to get them pre-funded so we can get them on the track. Not saying they're all going to be finished in a year, 2 years, what have you. One other topic that came up is the Route 1A sewer lines and the prospect of the prison of being a redevelopment project. And their requests for the expansion of sewer down to Production Road to the industrial park and to Hitching Post Drive and Clarkson Drive, that neighborhood, that are on either side of Route 1A as you head south. Now, one of the thoughts is if something is coming forward on the prison property, that we would hold back on moving those projects forward too quickly, thinking that a big development project would pay to bring the sewer down to their project and bring it to the doorstep of these two projects we have on either side of 1A and make it more economical, get us more for the buck of what we can do. There's also a general environmental discussion going on about the water basin itself of Walpole. One philosophy is that if we put everybody on sewer, we're going to de-water the basin of the community. And the basin just isn't our 2 or 3 aquifers. It's the rivers, the ponds, the streams, all the water resources. So there are many areas of town that really don't, they have the topography and the soils that they don't need sewer. They can support septic. And really, the fallacy is when people have the state has changed the regulations, so when people have a perfectly good septic system from 30 or 40 years ago, they go to sell their house, they can't pass, not because the septic system's no good, it's because the standards have been changed so much. They have to get rid of their septic system to sell their home. So, and that's somewhat idiosyncratic to this area, because on Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, they are much more acceptive of new technologies, of modern septic that have much more variability and limited constraints about how you can have septic. And sewer is very expensive. So I think we're thinking about our master plan and sewer and really being smart about how we do move forward with that strategically, not just willy-nilly and all guns forward, because we don't want to fall into the trap of environmentally challenging the water in the basin or over sewering the town, so to speak. There's clear areas where you have high density, where you have business opportunity that the town wants economic development wise. It's smart to sewer. Or where we have existing sewer systems that can be tied together and linked to make connections without long runs. But in general, we're going to be revisiting our sewer master plan as well.
Great.
I think that's kind of, I don't know if you guys have anything else you'd like to add?
So thank you for covering that, John. That was helpful. As you suggested, as you began your remarks, maybe we could have Jim Johnson now take us through the logic of what he's recommending, and then what I'd like to do is have some dialogue with the board. Okay? Okay.
Sure. So the rationale here is the commissioners asked me last night, why did you recommend the 350 from the water meter system components, the sewer meter system components as part of this, and the 1,125,000 for the Willis treatment plant? Couple reasons. One, I tried to be fair to split it between the two departments. And two, when we last met, we talked about funding $296,000 from the Morningside Drive pump station. This project's been awarded. I was concerned that the county may question, why are you going for a project that's has funds appropriated and to be awarded? So my thought process on that was, well, they may be a valid concern, so at least if we plug the 350 in there on the sewer side, that would restrict them, well, not restrict, allow them to continue to build up their sewer retained earnings a little bit and not have to dip into that on that one, because there is some concern with that, because sewer retained earnings was certified at $1,482,000. If we go with the legal holdback for the pending case and some of the reserve on that, that would only leave them $173,000 available, so it wouldn't cover the whole cost of that project. But if the commissioners would like to hold off on that, we could certainly do that and switch it for the cleaning of the water, the raw water lines. On the water side, we actually have $1,688,000 available, and with the proposed changes that the commissioners asked me to make last night, we're only spending $1,480,000, which includes the $475,000 for the cleaning of the raw water lines, which would leave $208,000 available in retained earnings. So it's more or less, the commissioners provided me with some directives, Scott, myself, and Rick last night, to move some things around. We are still moving forward with the supplemental water investigation. But to their credit, the commissioners said, let's investigate it first. Let's hold back $500,000 to do the construction. Let's see where the consultants say we should really pursue, which is what we're doing. So we made those adjustments. So I'm willing to do anything you'd like. I just would like some direction, because Capital started meeting this evening to hear the various requests. I think sewer's on with them sewer and water's on next week. So I need to provide some recommendations to Chairman Forsberg and the rest of the group there. So Scott, did I miss anything, or Rick? Okay.
Good.
One question that, I don't know if Scott or Rick want to answer this. From the difference of the raw water lines, would you consider that to be more a threat to the water quality and public health as an improvement as opposed to the meter change up? I mean, is that, I don't know if that's a measurable thing or?
The raw water line cleaning is not really a matter of public health. It's about efficiency. Right now, those lines are almost completely blocked. And it's also about capacity. You can't get the water through the pipe if it's too small. So once those are cleaned out, you'll be able to produce more water from the wells and at a lower energy cost.
So,
We're on a meter program, folks. In other words, every year we get like 200, 350 to replace meters going forward continuously. So we do have, if we miss this, it's not the end of the world. We have 350 coming up next round with the same thing. A meter, it's a matter of replacing existing meters.
so
Sorry, one last item. So the commissioners asked me to forward their request to the board this evening. So if you funded all three projects, it would total $1,950,000. And we drafted a couple of motions for you on the different options before you.
okay. So, thank you, John. Thanks, Scott. That was really helpful. Let me tell you how I'm thinking about it, and then I want to open it up to the board for their thoughts as well, because I do want to actually take these ARPA votes tonight. So, first of all, let's talk about the raw lines and the cleaning of those lines. I agree that that's something that is a priority. It is also my understanding that we are going, or the current plan is to pay for that out of retained earnings. Do I have that right?
Raw water lines? Yes,
Yeah,
that is, yes.
The 475.
Yes.
So whether it's ARPA or whether it's retained earnings, the point is, the work is actually going to happen because we agree with you it needs to happen, okay? And so I think that's important to say. The Willis Water Treatment Plant facility membrane, I think, is very important, and I think you guys agree with that. I think that has been something you have said to us for a while. I'm prepared to support an ARPA request for that tonight, and we'll have further discussion with the board, but I'm coming at that with a yes, I think that's an ARPA, that's a request we should fund out of ARPA. The meters, I also think we should fund out of ARPA, the 350. And my thinking there is, as you know, well, I've been vocal about my support for a couple things you're trying to accomplish around retained earnings. And we've talked about Morningside Drive ad nauseum because this conversation has been going on for like the past year. So we've talked about Morningside Drive, but Morningside Drive is kind of come and gone at this point. It's been funded, the work's underway, my understanding it's almost done. That was $296,000. So in my view, I think, and I hate to think of it this way because I don't really mean it this way, but I feel like I owe you that sum based on the commitments I've made to you, publicly. So the 350 for the meters seems to me to be a reasonable offset to 296, and it's something that we need to do. So I think that's the right answer, is fund the membrane out of ARPA, the meters out of ARPA, and then the raw line cleaning out of retained earnings. And why retained earnings? Well, really, that's what retained earnings is there for. And you've done a good job of addressing the rate issue. You're going to resolve the retained earnings issue, all of which is positive. This is a great opportunity to now demonstrate the real use of those retained earnings and use it for take the 475 for that. So from an ARPA point of view, that's how I'm thinking about it. I want to complete the equation, though, because to your point, you've got a lot of stuff going on here. So you also have a request for about $2.9 million fixing the pipes that are existing in the ground today. It's an ongoing process that you do to make sure that we don't find ourselves in a spot where suddenly all the pipes are falling apart. That's something we have to do. And I am completely supportive of that as well. And then you've got the 2.9 million, it just happens to be the same number, and we're not 100% sure whether that number is right, it might be a little high, but it's a working number, for the redundant line to one of the main storage tanks, which right now we only have the one line. And you have all made the point loud and clear to us that that's something you can't live with, and we totally agree. You know, in this world we live in right now, you have to have redundant everything, because when something fails, as we've learned in the last couple of years, the ramifications can be harsh. So having that, both of those 2.9 million funded and under a borrowing article, which I understand you also approved last night, I think that is also brilliant, and I think a major step forward in terms of the work that needs to get done. So I again, just to recap, I'll support the membrane and the 350 for the meters out of ARPA. I will support your request at town meeting for retained earnings for the 475 for the raw line cleaning. I will support your request for borrowing for the two $2.9 million projects. And I think those represents major step forward for water and sewer. So with that said, let me open it up to the rest of the group. Who'd like to go first?
Jim, if I may, could you also address the supplemental water investigation?
You know, first I'm hearing about it tonight. It sounds like you've been talking about it, but I haven't heard about it. The way you described it tonight, I think it's something that's worth investigating. We've talked over the years about MWRA as an option to bring water, and we're already on MWRA sewer, so we already have a major relationship with them, but not on the water side. Again, with the lens of, you know, resiliency and redundancy, risk mitigation, having an alternate source of water, I mean, it's critical that we have water here in the town. Having an alternate source of water, to me, makes a lot of sense. What I would like to know more about is, what does that really mean? So in order to do that, you know, what does that cost the town to join the MWRA? What do we have to do from a facilities and infrastructure point of view to be able to accommodate the water flow into the town? I assume it'd have to go into our tanks and things like that, perhaps through the treatment facilities. I'm not smart enough to really know, but it's got to come in and be handled. So I would want to know a lot more about that before I get too far out on a limb there, but on a conceptual level, I think it sounds smart.
I think we were thinking that possibly we would ask for a slot at town meeting to have a little informational session.
Yep.
To have the MWRA explain the program.
Okay.
So you people could be warmed up to what the options are, what some of the costs are, what the experience of Canton and some of our neighbor towns that have done this. I think Stoughton, Canton, et cetera, Westwood.
Well, I'm sure we can accomplish that, and I think that'd be a great place to bring it up, because that way, all of town meeting here is that ultimately town meeting would have to vote this. So I think that's a really good place to start, John.
Right. Okay.
Okay?
It is, I just can't emphasize, it's gonna be, they've started with 3 contaminated, so what are they going to next? Is it 6 more?
2 more rules coming.
2 more, they got 68, they're gonna be bringing them in each year, and we may become overburdened with that.
And I think that's what needs to be understood here, is what does it all mean to us as a town?
Right.
I won't re-say all the things I just said, but that's where I have a lot of gaps in knowledge, and I'd like to, you know, understand this a lot better. But conceptually, I get what you're saying, and it makes sense to me. Okay.
Can I jump in on that real
Sure.
quick?
Yeah.
So the other thing that I always think about is, you know, the MWRA has a model, and there's a certain cost to play within their model. And we have a model, and we know what it costs to produce the water. So as you think about incremental water, what does it cost us to do incremental water versus what does it cost them to do incremental water? And that's that whole financial analysis that I'd really love to know a lot more about. You know, it may be that we're very happy with what we're doing in town, but as the town grows, we may not be able to get enough out of our well infrastructure. I don't know. I mean, you would be telling us that. that it may be very viable to look at incremental water through the MWRA, or vice versa. Maybe we should take more than incremental water from the MWRA, because if we throttle back a little bit, our costs go down dramatically with energy and all that. Again, I don't know, I'm just sort of thinking of 2 pipes coming into town. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to look at the models, so.
And we do have a nice model, and I think Rick would agree. Unfortunately, it's not an ideal world. The uncontrollable variables we can't control them, and they're influencing us. As Glenn knows, we get limited how much water we can use. We get dictated. We could have more water to our residents to get rid of the orange lawns, but we're not allowed.
And you mentioned PFAS, so what other chemicals do
PFAS
we
is
have
another
to
one, and the
adapt all
septic
the
is another
plans?
one. So-
Agreed. So, yeah, I'd love to talk more about it in the future.
Can we talk about it like it's an either or, like we either go to the MWRA or we?
No,
we have
I'm
a
thinking
system?
it's 2 pipes coming into town.
Both.
Can we juggle them both?
And we also, as we investigate supplemental water source, we could look at Minebrook, which has, well, we already have a well sort of drilled, experimental. We know that there's water there. We could look at developing that and the cost of doing that, and simultaneously look at what the MWRA is charging to tap in. We have an emergency connection with them, but maybe we want to start using their water more to supplement, what we already can produce ourselves. And at one point, we brought this to town meeting, and it was I remember it being, I think $4.5 million is the number in my head. And it was a lot for the town meeting to chew, and they said no. But from what I understand, that equation has changed, and they might not be charging 4.5, maybe it's nothing, or maybe it's somewhere in between. So if it's more reasonable now, again, we could talk about this more, but it's certainly worth exploring. I'm glad to see that in there. We weren't able to do it when I was on the commission, so I'm glad that you guys got around to it. It's a fantastic
People
project.
have to understand, it's not a threat to our water system.
Yeah.
It starts off more as an insurance policy, as you say, for just logical redundancy to protect the town. And as it evolves, it may become more or stay the same, but we'll have those, and we can take our time developing
Yeah.
Minebrook 4,
So,
because
so
we'll
let
have
me,
that insurance policy.
so let me just try and move us on, because I know we've got a lot more to cover here tonight. Glenn, anything, since you were speaking, anything?
Yeah,
else?
I don't have a whole lot. I would just gotta say, I'm looking at your capital plan, the 2.9 million borrowing for I'm gonna repeat everything you already said. It's great that they're doing that. It's a recurring thing. If we skip a year, if we skip multiple years, we really start to fall behind. You really have already said most of what I need to say. I think you guys are doing a great job. The borrowing is spot on. The use of retained earnings is spot on. It's great. So I think we're doing a lot. You're doing a lot this year, and it's really getting us where we need to be. So that's all.
Okay. Ally?
Thank you. I'm pleased to see such a robust plan for capital improvement projects for sewer and water, and that retained earnings are once again being used to improve our systems. So I think it's very important that these projects be addressed and that retained earnings be utilized that way. I am in favor of the Willis plant membranes replacement. We've been discussing that, utilizing ARPA funds with that, and also the meteor system components. Those components typically do come across in capital budget every year to replace about $300,000, and I think we should continue that project. I don't want to see a lag because I don't feel anything should be falling behind for sewer and water. So if those components every year, we have that plan, 300,000 at least, 350,000 to replace those, we should continue with that. One of my questions was what the balance of retained earnings would be, and so Jim went over that as well. That's right. If all these projects go through, it was 173,000 would be available for sewer, and 208,000 would then be available for water.
Yes, and that's still allowing the commissioners to maintain a 20% reserve in both sewer and water. 20% in the water is 947, 20% in the sewer is 1,019,000.
And then as far as the investigation for alternate water source, I believe, John, you came to FinCom whenever we had the town meeting, would it have been 3 or 4 years ago, for that idea of a hookup that was $4.5 million. We had a lot of discussion. And I also know with the MWRA, when you join, Walpole does have a great water system, and there are issues that are going to come forth. I think having redundant lines, PFAS, there are issues that are going to be coming forward that the sewer and water commissioners will have to address. The MWRA, and I believe Walpole, if Walpole did join, the vote that Walpole would then have as a member of the MWRA is very, very low. So I think it's something that we need to investigate because there does need to be a redundancy. We need to have a backup plan for our sewer and water. And so I think the investigation is a good idea moving forward and seeing where that goes.
You know, I think that's a contractual relationship too. It's not defined by one party. So we can write into our agreement constraints that we have there are other towns that are doing this, like Canton's a good model of that. They have supplemental, they have control. And the timing, the economics are much better than they were 4 years ago, as far as joining. And it doesn't mean we don't do Minebrook 4, it just means we have more time to plan it properly, and we're not under the gun to develop an immediate redundancy system for these risks.
Okay. Ben?
Yeah, just, and I won't rehash everything, you know, we've talked a lot about rate structure at town meeting, we've talked a lot about retained earnings and all those sorts of things, so I don't want to rehash that. You know, a lot of these items that we're talking about tonight that are going to be funded out of retained earnings, funded out of ARPA, or utilized as borrowing, are all kind of deferred maintenance items. So I think it's critical that we stay on top of that as we go forward and not let a backlog like this create itself again. So, you know, I'm hopeful that we can do that. In terms of, you know, people listening to this, and I know that all the folks on water and sewer are experts in this, and we have Scott and Rick, and we've all had a lot of conversations on it. But we're talking about putting, you know, possibly 1.4 million in ARPA funds into this system. We're also talking about MWRA and some of these other options we have. It's not like that an MWRA situation, whether it was going to be getting part of our water from there or all of the water, that's not forthcoming in a year, 2 years, 3 years. So this 1.4 million that we're going to take out of ARPA to put into the system is required to function. It's going to be used. It's not like it's going to be a sunk cost that we then move in another direction. Just so anybody who's watching this understands that that's the point. And I am, as with all the other board members, really interested in this additional investigation that's taking place. I'm glad that y'all are getting out in front of it, and I think it's going to be exciting to hear what comes up there. So thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Mark?
Yeah, I don't want to reiterate everything that's been said, but I support what you're doing with the borrowing. I do like the idea of the membrane and the meter system components, knowing that you'll do clean the water lines via retained earnings. I think that's great. I also personally appreciate that you came to our meeting. I think it's important to get together and talk about these things. And I would just say, at some point, you're going to have a meeting, and you're probably going to want to invite us to join your meeting. And I'm going to tell you, I'm happy to do that, and I think our board would be happy to do that. Mm-hmm. Especially, you know, the MWRA topic. You know, if you bring experts in to talk about that, let us know. I'd love to come join your, you know, the meeting. Same thing. Sit in a meeting, be able to participate. So I think the more we can work with each other, the better. And again, whether you come here or we go there, I'm all in favor of that. So thanks for doing that.
Good, we appreciate that.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to close discussion, and I'd like to move forward with a vote on ARPA. I'd like to move forward with a motion for the membrane and the meter system. If other members want something beyond that, we'll deal with that as a separate vote. So, Ally?
I move to motion to direct the town administrator to submit a request to the county to release $1,475,000 in ARPA funds to address the following water and sewer infrastructure needs: of Willis plant membrane replacement of $1,125,000 and the meter system components at $350,000.
Seconded?
You have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. 500. Does any member of the board want anything further for ARPA for water and sewer? Okay, and that's not to say that we might not come back at some future point and have further discussions on it. Again, you know, we have a go-slow approach on the ARPA spend, but hopefully this is, you know, going to help push things forward for you. And again, very happy with the borrowing that you're going to do and all the work you've done around the rates. So thanks very much. You're doing great work.
Don't be shy. If you come up with a few extra dollars, you can take partial contributions.
We'll keep it in mind, John. Thank you. Okay, good discussion, and thank you all for being here tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's keep on going here. We have a middle school building budget update. So, hey, how are you? We have Brian Jarvis from Compass Management here.
Good evening, everyone. Quick update on the middle school project, specifically on the budget, and then welcome to answer questions. We'll do a quick review of the total project budget as it was approved at town meeting last fall, where the budget currently stands as of the end of July of this year, where MSBA reimbursements stand, and then just a timeline for the remainder of this year and some of the key milestone dates that we're working towards. So this slide is actually taken from, I believe, the town meeting packet, as well as some of the lead-up presentations, kind of outlining the major components of the middle school project budget, starting with the feasibility schematic design, project management, architecture, engineering, an estimated construction cost at that point of $92.6 million, which is made up of a few components. Miscellaneous costs related to administration of the project, mostly during construction. Furniture, fixtures, and equipment and technology budget, and then an owner's construction contingency and an owner's soft cost contingency for a total of just under $116 million. So that was the budget that was presented and approved, and that budget was the one that was the basis of the project funding agreement with the Massachusetts School Building Authority, the MSBA. This is tough to see, but we actually take that budget then, and the first column on the left here is that budget broken down into all of different components that kind of made up those categories. This is what was sent into the MSBA. This was part of the record document in the exhibit with the project funding agreement and the scope of budget agreement, and this is what we manage to on a monthly basis. All of the costs, all of the commitments, and all the expenditures on the job are coded to these line items per the MSBA's coded system. And then we balance that out with town accounting. Currently, we're on budget. We actually, we're slightly under in the owner's project manager category and the architect and engineering category as far as executing those contract amendments right after town meeting. So, and then the far column all the way to the right is showing funds currently available to commit or spend in some of those line items. And simply, we just haven't got to that point on the project for some of those items. So we are tracking that budget on a monthly basis, and this update goes to the building committee and to town administration and accounting on a monthly basis. This is the second page of that budget. At the top is actually a construction contract. So we have a pre-construction contract with Fontaine Brothers, who is working with us now during the design phase and also in some of the enabling work that you might have seen up at the middle school. And we're still carrying that $92.6 million construction estimate that we're actually starting to pick away at with some of the early release packages. So the summer work, for example, we had an amendment for early release package number 1. We're currently putting together an early release package number 2, which will be the site work for the new building. There will be another release in the fall for the concrete and the steel, and then finally wrap up the total project budget just after the new year. The goal is to maintain and stay on that $92.6 million. All of the other line items below, the miscellaneous costs, the furnishings, technology, and the construction contingencies obviously have not been, and nothing's been committed yet or expended. So we're still holding those budget line items. MSBA reimbursements through the end of July. So the way that this process works is once we have that project funding agreement in place with the MSBA, we're able to then institute the reimbursements. So basically we send in a monthly package to the MSBA, a payment request based on all the approved invoices for that month. That's backed up by the town warrant, which shows the payments that have gone out. The MSBA audits those, looks at all of the costs that are eligible for reimbursement, and then reimburses the town at the agreed upon percentage, which is currently just over 52%. So through the end of July, we've submitted $3.7 million in costs to date on the project, going all the way back to really like day one. Of those 3.7, 3.2 were deemed eligible. And of that $3.2 million, the town has received back through the end of July just over $1.7 million, or 52% on the money. The 3.2, that 1.7 actually represents about 45% of total submitted costs. I think during town meeting we talked about, at the end of the day, you're going to get 52% of all eligible costs, but that's not necessarily going to be 52% of all project costs. So we are trending to kind of stay on target for what we were talking about back at town meeting. So that's been a very consistent process, quick turnaround, basically monthly. After submitting it, we get the town gets the reimbursement almost within the month. And we, as of the end of July, we still had one in process. Another reimbursement went in at the end of July, so that's tracking. I think that's probably already come in, and will be updated on the August update. Moving forward, there's a lot on this slide, but just a general picture of what the remaining year looks like. So the summer work started as the orange bar. We have some site work that we're anticipating to start this fall. Now that we have the construction fence up and have separated the new building site from the existing building, moving into foundations towards the end of the year. Hopefully get as much of that in as possible before the cold weather sets in, with the goal of actually being able to start erecting steel during the winter, which is a good time to do that. So that timing seems to work out. We have a couple submissions which are in the light green to the MSBA. We just submitted, we'll be submitting the 60% construction document, or CD package, to the MSBA this week. We anticipate a 90% construction documents package, so almost final documents in early November. We also have an early release package number 3. So that same package is what the contractor is actually going to price concrete, steel, roofing, windows, and elevators off of. They're going to buy that out early because a lot of those things right now with the marketplace are long lead items. So they're getting those in the queue early so that they are available for when we need them on schedule. And then the goal would be to have 100% documents done just before the holidays, with the bid set going out for all of the trade contractors, which will be your mechanical contractors, plumbing contractors, electricians, all the typical filed subs. In a construction manager at risk, they're referred to as trade contractors. Those will be back early, mid-January, and at that point, Fontaine will be able to round out the budget and put together a guaranteed maximum price at the first of the year. So it's just kind of a breakdown of those milestones in a list form, a little bit easier to follow. Woven in here is start of full construction, which is targeted for mid-September of this year. We have a site contractor on board in the next week or so, with the anticipation of working inside the construction fence by middle of September. As I mentioned, that early release package, number 3, is going to go out at the beginning of October. That's also the construction document set that we'll be doing the next estimate on, so we'll be doing a full construction estimate. Obviously, we'll have some known costs associated with the summer's work, with the site package that we're buying out now, and then we'll continue to estimate the rest of the project. That'll be back in by the end of October. We'll submit all of that to the MSBA in early November and then be ready for bids by the end of the year. And the goal would be to get a guaranteed maximum price, which will be the not to exceed construction number within budget of the 92.6 for construction by the end of January. And I think that's all I had.
Thank you, Brian. That was good as usual. I have a couple questions, and
Sure.
we'll open it up to the broader board. So on the page that's not numbered, but the one for month end, July 31st, 2022.
Yep.
Yeah, that one. So that column at the end that says available to commit or spend, for the ones that have nothing in it, that means we've 100% spent or committed through contracts and so forth.
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have any concerns over those areas where we have spent or committed 100%?
No. Most of those are either completed already, or they are portions of, for instance, either our contract or the architect's contract, where that's the negotiated fee for those segments of work.
Yep.
So they're just broken down by the phase and they're assigned a separate budget line item. So yeah, unless there's a change to the project scope for any reason, that we wouldn't exceed that number.
Okay, good. Thank you on that. And then, just in terms of the overall project budget status, so the next page, I guess it is. So this is showing us, so I'm looking at the revised budget and then committed. The difference is what's available to commit or spend.
Yeah, so the way that this budget status report reads is the starting budget, which is the MSBA's project funding agreement budget, is the first column. Any budget transfers that happen during the course of the project, we would show the amount that's getting transferred. We also have a report that goes into our monthly update to all the committees that show where that funding comes from what line item it goes to what line item. That then kind of creates that next column of the revised budget, so to speak. The committed is everything we have on contracts to date, so basically that's our contract, the architect's contract, the pre-construction fee for Fontaine Builders, the early release package number 1. So just over just under 14 million has been committed to date. And then spent prior to this period is what's been spent up through the end of June, what was recommended for the end of July, and then spent to date as of the end of July is that $4.3 million. What's left on current contracts, so basically that's the balance of the architect's contract, the balance of our contract, and the balance of anything that's been issued to Fontaine. And then basically what's left to spend or commit or spend is at 101.
Okay,
Yep.
so the actual expenditures, real cash out the door has been about 4.4 million.
Correct, to date.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, okay, now I'm tracking with you. Okay, and then the last column is available to commit or spend. I see how the math works. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's helpful. And then the last question I had was, what's the risk on the foundation? I can see, I think it's 12/13 is when you expect to start that work? Is that or how am I reading that?
Which one are you looking at, the timeline?
Yeah, I'm looking at the timeline. So you see where it says foundation in the orange line?
Yeah, we're targeting foundation towards the end of this year. There's a 12/13 date there where that's actually targeting a building committee meeting. The
Okay.
foundation,
I see it, yeah.
we're really trying to get the that package approved in the middle of November, start foundations in November and December to get enough going that they'll be able to swing certain sequences of steel.
So that foundation start line is really back in November?
Yeah, it's really back in the middle of November
Gotcha.
after we make that award. It's going to spill into January as needed, but the goal is really to kind of get as much done prior to the really cold weather setting in. January will be tough. There'll probably be some
Yeah.
need for winter conditions.
Yeah,
But the goal is to be ready for steel come beginning of the year, February timeframe, swing steel during February, March, and then we're off and running with the shell of the building.
great. Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Great.
Other questions from the board?
I'm currently attending the meetings as well, and I've been, very impressed with all of the updates and the work that's been going on and the scope of the work. The last meeting, there was quite a bit of discussion about the list, and hopefully we'll, continue to stay on budget and be able to continue to add things back into the project.
Thanks, Ally. Anybody else?
Yeah, I just highlight again what Brian said in terms of ER3, as it's shown on here, is a considerable amount of work scope and a considerable amount of dollars that are going to be committed at that point. And so as we talk about working our way through the project and having a better idea of what the actual budget will be, that's something in October, the end of October, to keep an eye on, as is then the 90% construction set, which is the end of October. So at that point, say by the end of October, we're gonna have a very strong idea of where the budget is headed from that sort of perspective, so.
Yeah, and if I may, I'll add to that. So you're right. With that ERP3, those scopes of work, in addition to the summer work and the site package, will constitute about 33% of the construction cost. So we'll have hard costs, known costs at that point for about 33% of that budget. We'll be doing an estimate on the remaining portion. So by the end of October with that estimate, we'll have a good finger on the pulse of what that budget is shaping up to be. And then obviously when trade bids come in January, that's going to be another 20-30% of the budget in a hard cost. And as we put together that final GMP, we'll have known costs to be putting into that, which will be an advantage to kind of knowing where we're going to be at the end of the day. And it'll help us. The early release package number 3 is going to help us with that last estimate as well, because a lot of big scopes will be bought out at that point.
Yeah, and I know that people are, and rightly so, really concerned about inflation and all the things that have been going on, and certainly, we've seen that in the business going forward, having an impact on some projects, and Brian's brought it up at a lot of our meetings to keep us abreast of that issue. And while I don't want to minimize the possibility of that impacting the cost of the project, I do want to kind of temper maybe what people see in the news about it in terms of it's oftentimes very specialty types of work, like the HVAC, the air handling, maybe some electrical components that are impacted by that. And so I know Brian and the team have a really solid grip on that, and it's not maybe as widespread. So, one example, or maybe by way of an analogy, would say, when COVID came, we set aside a lot of money and we were very conservative in our budgeting for the town because we didn't know what impacts we're going to have. Ultimately, it ended up that things went very well. We were able to use some of that money that we set aside, but we didn't need the bulk of it. So we're hoping that this is going to be kind of a similar scenario where, hey, we plan for the worst case, but it's looking as we go along here like it's less and less of an issue. So not out of the woods, but certainly promising returns so far.
Good news.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark?
Yeah, the financial aspect is really my focus. I appreciate you coming in. And I do feel like at the end of the year, we'll have a much better handle on what those numbers look like. And that's what's interesting to me, you know, to know where we are, to know if we need to do other things. I know that at your meetings, because I've talked to some people about that, you know, I know you've done some value engineering where you may have wanted this material, but that price doesn't work, so you substitute something else. So I think it's important that everybody understand that a lot of that has been going on. And the goal is to keep the building a whole school that will work for the town. And at some degree, it doesn't matter whether you use A or B, as long as you can build the building. And I do remember when we were, I was very involved with the Council on Aging, and there was some, as were you, and there was some discussion at one point about people wanting round windows as opposed to square windows, and this as opposed to that. And my answer to everybody was, I don't really care about that. I want the whole building built, because it's all about the programs. And the middle school is the same way, you know, whether the paint is blue or green, it really doesn't matter. We need the place for the kids to come in and learn. And I think from everything I've heard, you guys are all collectively, you know, the building committee, and you guys doing a great job keeping people focused and focusing on the big picture, which is, it's really all about the kids and it's about the education. So I really do appreciate that. I know that's hard when sometimes people have their heart set on a certain thing and they can't necessarily have that thing the way they wanted it, but there'll be something just as good, but a little different. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, that'll wrap us up. Brian, thank you. Very good update. Really appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you in the not-too-distant future with further updates.
Yeah, absolutely, anytime.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
okay.
Thanks.
Okay, it's after 8:15. We have time set aside for open forum. Anybody here for open forum? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Let's keep on moving to.
Come on, Doug.
I didn't think you were.
Give us something.
You're certainly welcome.
I like the pool discussion, but.
Okay.
I figured you would.
Okay. So let's move to new business. Vote to close and sign the fall town meeting warrant. Ally?
Motion to close and sign the fall 2022 town meeting warrant.
Seconded.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 5-0-0. Keep on rolling, Ally.
Motion to approve stadium event parking lot license at 49 Summer Street with 63 spaces.
Seconded.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0-0.
Motion to approve request of Todd Lyman to hold a block party with music on September 25th, 2022 from 1 to 5 p.m. on Lady Slipper Drive with a rain date of September 24th, 2022.
Seconded.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0-0.
Motion to approve request of Andrew Bell to hold a block party with the music on August 28th, 2022 from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Brown Drive and Oak Hill Drive.
Seconded.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0-0.
Motion to approve request of Union Congregational Church to hold their annual Harvest Fair on Saturday, September 17th, 2022. Make Rhodes Ave a one-way from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Applicant must ensure the fire department has easy access to Road Ave during the event if necessary.
Seconded.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0-0.
Motion to accept with gratitude the following donations from Diane Brown, Georgina to COA Gifts, from Georgina Brown to COA Gifts, Janet Shelby to COA Gifts, Rhonda Crandall to COA Gifts, Arlene Thomas to COA Gifts, Donald and Josephine Bambara to COA Gifts, Northeast Novelty the Night Before the Fourth account, Dana Budcutt to the Walpole Town Forest Trust Fund, and Friends of Walpole Elders to the COA Gifts.
With gratitude. Seconded.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0-0. Minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes of August 2nd, 2022 as presented in our packet.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. 5-0-0.
I'll abstain, Jim.
Oh, okay, thanks, Ben. 4-0-1, thank you. Jim, Town Administrators for update.
Sure, so just a few things. Gill Street, I wanted to provide the board with a brief update on that. As of today's date, still no problems up there keeping that as a two-way street. I'll continue to check in with both the chiefs on this matter going forward. I believe they're coming in September for their quarterly update, so I'm sure the board may ask, how's that going with school being back in session? Gillette Stadium traffic, this weekend we have Kenny Chesney on Friday and Saturday. I expect we'll adhere to the same plans that we had in place for Elton John. And we'll modify them if we need to on the fly, but it seemed to work pretty well those 2 nights. And as far as I know, the traffic with the Patriots games have not been much of a problem at all. Middle school update, Brian provided you with the oversight of the budgets and everything. I just wanted to let you know, on-site meetings have started each Wednesday in the morning with the contract with Brian, with his team, with the design team, school administration, so we expect that to be ongoing for the rest of the project. We do expect some possible hiccups next week when school starts, but I know Bridget and her team are gonna be on site helping out with the school principal. We'll have extra police presence down there because it is confusing once you go in at the middle school there. And last item, town meeting. The board voted to close the warrant and sign it tonight. We have 15 articles on there. Capital budget started their deliberation tonight. They're gonna be going the next few weeks, talking about all the various requests. FinCom starts next week, and we're right in the thick of things with the budget, so we're ready to go, and I look forward to town meeting on Monday, the 17th. So that's it.
Awesome. Any questions for Jim? Mark?
I just want to make a comment. I hate this end of 1A, how bumpy it is and how bad it is, but I have driven on the Norwood end of 1A a few times recently, and they're doing a really good job reconstructing that road. That new part of the road they built is really good. So, you know, I just wanted to recognize that, and I still hate how bumpy this end of the road is.
It's tough.
Yeah. But there is hope coming, so, although it's gonna take a long
Good plan.
time.
My car's front end appreciates it, Mark. Okay, anything else for Jim? Okay, motion to adjourn, please.
Second. Motion to adjourn?
Seconded.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
500. Thank you very much. Patrick, thank you for everything you do for us, and good night, everyone. Take care. Bye.